Hey folks, in this episode I'm going to show you how to make this spaceship here. I'm going to make this in two parts. For this episode we're going to focus on making the spaceship and a basic animation, and for the second episode we're going to place the spaceship in a space environment. So without further ado, let's get to it. Open up Blender, we go to Edit, Preferences, we're going to go to System, and you're going to click this Allow Online Access. When you've enabled that, we're going to go to Get Extensions and search for Discombobulator, and you should see the Discombobulator appear. Click download and install, and when you've downloaded that, go to add-ons and then type in DIS for Discombobulator and make sure that it's enabled there in your add-ons. The second add-on we're going to use will be the Node Wrangler, so type in Node and then enable the Node Wrangler here, and when you've enabled the Node Wrangler, click this button here and click Save Preferences. And that will ensure that the add-ons load every time you load Blender. We can now close this window here. The next assets we're going to need will be some displacement maps. So open up your web browser, type in displacement X, and navigate to this website here where it says displacement X. And what this does, it generates displacement maps. So if I just click render using the default settings, you can see what happens there. So you can choose your resolution. I'm going to go for 8K. I'm going to turn my iterations up to, let's say, around about 1000. I'm going to turn my background brightness down to 0. Under rectangles, I'm going to turn the scale all the way down to 20. Under grid, I'm going to turn the scale down to 20, and I'm going to increase the gap to, let's say, 400, maybe 500. I'll go for 400, something around there. Under columns, I'm going to turn the scale all the way down to 20. I'm going to increase the gap to around about 400-500 mark. In fact, I'm going to increase the gap on my grid to 500 as well. Under rows, I'm going to decrease the scale to 20 and increase the gap to around about 500. Disable lines. I don't want any lines here. I'm going to enable sprites. I'm going to enable Big Data, Aggro Max and Crap Pack. So we've got all the sprite packs. I'm going to keep my composition filters as they are by default. I'll then navigate up and I'll click render. If you're not happy with the displacement map, you just click render again and it will generate a new seed. I'm just going to keep clicking this until I've got something that I like. I'm happy with that, so I'll click download. I'm going to keep all my settings as they are, and I'm going to click render again. I'm going to find another displacement map. Okay, I'll be happy with that, so then I'll click download. So that's the second map. Now we need a normal map for this displacement map here. So I'm going to scroll down, I'm going to click preview normal, and that will create a normal map based on the current map that's already in there. I'll then click download. I'm going to scroll down, I'll disable the normal map by clicking preview original. The next displacement map is going to be for lights on the spacecraft, and we're only going to be using the rectangles and grids for this. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to disable columns, I'm going to disable rows, and I'll disable sprites. So the only two filters will be these two here. Maybe I'll turn the iterations up to 2000. I'll then click render. If you're not happy with that, click render again. And we're just going to keep doing this until we got something that we like. Maybe something around there. I'll then click download. All those should be saved in your downloads folder. I've got a project folder called Deep Space Explorer Blender Tutorial, and I'm going to move my displacement maps into this folder here just so I know where they are. So these are my 4 textures. I'm just going to close my web browser. I'm going to go back to Blender, and now we can make a start on the modeling. In Blender, I'm going to hit numpad 1 to go into front view. I'm going to delete my default lamp. I'm going to select my default cube. So with the default cube selected, I'm going to hit numpad 1 to go into side view. I'm going to tab into edit mode. I'm going to hit SX10, hit enter, and that will scale it on the x-axis by 10. Hit numpad 3 to go into side view. I'm going to hit SY5 and then hit enter, and that will scale it on the y-axis. I'll go back to numpad 3 to go into front view. I'll then hit SZ2.5, hit enter. So you got something that looks similar to this. If I just select these two vertices, we've got vertex select, edge select, and face select, which is one of these. Alternatively, you can hit 1, 2, or 3. So I'm going to go to face select. I'm going to select this face. I'll shift select this face. I'm going to hit X, and I'm going to delete the faces. I'll then hit number 2 to go into edge select. Select this edge, shift select this one, shift select this one, and this one. I'll then hit Control B to bevel. I'll take my cursor to the bottom left and expand these bevel options, and I'm going to change the width to, let's say, 1.5. I'll then collapse the bevel options here. I'll then hit numpad 7 to go into top view. I'll then hit Control R to add a loop cut. Scroll your mouse wheel until you've got 4 cuts, left click and then right click, and that will click it in place. I'll hit numpad 1, go into side view. I'll just scroll over to around about here. I'm going to select this edge here. I want to select this edge loop, so I'm going to hold down shift out and I'm going to select this edge a couple of times until I've got the whole edge loop selected. And I'll do the same over here, shift out, left click select. Okay, Excellent. I'll then hit S, Shift X, and that will scale on every axis, excluding the Z axis. And I'll bring it down to maybe something around about there. I'll hit Control R to add a loop cut on the top. Scroll until you've got 2 loop cuts, and then left click and right click that in place. I'll do the same to the bottom, so I'm going to hit Control R, scroll until you've got 2 loop cuts, left click, and then right click in place. Excellent. I'm going to hit A to select all my vertices. I'm going to hit numpad 1 to go into side view. I'll then hit G, X, hold down Control, snap it to the grid, and I'm going to drag it to around about there. I'm going to hit Shift D, X, hold down Control, snap it to the grid, and I'll bring it around about there. I'll then Shift D, duplicate, X, snap it to the grid until it's in the middle. I'll then hit P and separate by selection. Tab out of edit mode, select that centerpiece, tab into edit mode, hit number 1 to go to vertices select. I'll then toggle my X-ray view on, and I'll box select all of these inner vertices. I'll then hit S, Shift X to scale on every axis, excluding the Z axis. Maybe I'll type in 2, something around about there. I hit enter. I'll then hit A to select all the vertices. I'm going to hit SX 0.5, hit enter. I'll toggle out of X-ray view. Okay, I'm kind of happy with that. I'm going to tab out of edit mode. I'm going to shift left click select this object. I'll hit Control J, and that will join the objects together. So now it's one piece. I'm going to work on the front of the ship now. So I'm going to tab into edit mode. I'm going to select this vertice, hold down shift, hold down alt, and then left click and select this edge loop. I'll hit numpad 7 to go into top view. Hit E for extrude, X to extrude it on the X axis, and hold down Control to snap it to the grid. And I'm going to bring it forward, let's say 2 meters, something around about there. I'll then hit E, X, hold down Control, snap it to the grid, and we'll bring it forward to around about there. Maybe I'll hit S, hold down Control to snap it in increments, something around about there. I'll then hit E to extrude, X, hold down Control, and I'll bring it to something around about there. S, hold down Control, snap it in increments, and I'll bring it down to, let's say, something around about there. Excellent. It's a bit too pointy for my liking, so I'm just going to hit numpad 7. I'm going to hit G, X, hold down Control, snap it to the grid to around about there. I'm going to hit numpad period to zoom into that object. I'll then hit E, S, hold down Control, snap it to the grid. Okay, I'm not really happy with this method, so I'm just going to hit X and delete those vertices. I'll then hold down Shift, hold down Alt, and select this edge loop here. I'll then hit Control F, and I'm going to choose Grid Fill. I'll then hit I for inset. I'll bring this down to around about there, and I'm going to navigate to the bottom left and expand the inset faces options, and I'm going to type in 0.2. Okay, I'll then hit X and delete faces. And what that's done is basically ensured that the distance between the edges of this inner edge and the outer edge are even. I'll then hold down Shift, Alt, and select this edge loop here. I'm going to hit numpad 7 to go into top view. I'm going to hit E, X, hold down Control to snap it in increments. I'll snap it to around about there, and maybe one more time. E, X, hold down Control, snap it to the grid, and then hit S, hold down Control, and snap it to the grid. Okay, excellent. I'll then hit Control F, and I'm going to choose Grid Fill. I'm going to hit number 3 to go to Face Select. Select this face, Control, Shift, and select this face. So we've got all these bottom faces selected here. I'm going to hit numpad 1 to go into Side View. I'll then hit E, hold down Control to snap it to the grid. 2, maybe something around about there perhaps. I'll then hit Control numpad 3, which will go into side view, but facing the front of the ship. S, Y, hold down Control to snap it in increments until it kind of lines up with these lines here. I'll then hit numpad 1 to go into side view. S, X, hold down Control to snap it to the grid. 2, around about there perhaps. Let me just collapse these options down here. Now I want to select these front faces here. So I'm going to select this one, shift select this one, and shift select this one. I'm going to hit I for inset. I'll just bring it in to maybe around about there for now. I'm going to take my cursor to the bottom left and expand the inset faces options. And for the thickness, I'm going to type in 0.5. I'll then collapse inset faces options. I'll then hit numpad 1 to go into side view. I'm going to go into wireframe view. I'm going to hit number 1 for vertices select. I'm going to hit E, X, hold down Control, snap it to the grid to around about there. I'll then hit SX0. I'm going to go back into solid view. So this could be like a loading bay where other ships can dock. Now I'm going to navigate round to this edge loop. So I'll select this vertice, hold down Shift, Alt, and left click and select the entire edge loop. I'll then hit Control F and select Grid Fill. We want this pattern here. So if you're not getting that pattern, you're just going to have to adjust your span and your offset until you've got something desirable that looks like this. And we're going to do the same for this edge loop. Select this vertex, hold down shift out and left click select the edge loop, hit Control F and choose grid fill. We're just going to change the span until you got something desirable. I'm going to do the same for this edge loop. Select this vertex, shift out, left click and select the entire edge loop, hit Control F and we'll choose grid fill. And I'll do the same for this one here too. So I'm going to select this vertex, shift out, left click select the edge loop, hit Control F and choose grid fill. Okay, I'm going to have to adjust this one. Excellent. Now I want to inset all of these faces that we've created. Number 3, to go into face select. So we've already got these faces selected. Now I'm going to hold down shift and select this face. Hold down Control, shift and then select the opposite corner face. And that should select all of those faces because it's pick shortest path. I'm going to hold down shift, select this face. Hold down Control, shift and select this face. Shift select this face. Hold down Control, shift and left click select this face. So that's all those faces selected. I'll then hit I. I'm just going to bring this in to around about there, and maybe for the thickness I'm going to type in 0.5. Excellent. I'll then scroll to the bottom left and collapse the inset faces options. Now we're going to work on the back end a bit, so I'm going to hit number 1 for vertex select. I'll left click this vertex here. I'll then hit shift out and select the entire edge loop. I'm going to hit numpad 1 to go into side view, X, hold down Control, snap it to the grid till it's 2 units. I'll then hit E, X, hold down Control, snap it to the grid 1 unit, S, hold down Control, snap it to the grid, and I'll bring it up to, let's say, around about there. E, X, hold down Control, snap it to the grid 1 more unit. I'll then hit S, hold down Control, snap it to the grid till it's around about, let's say, there. E, X, hold down Control, snap it to the grid, and I'll bring this forward, let's say 2 units. I'll then hit Control F and we'll choose grid fill. I'm going to take my cursor to the bottom left and expand the grid fill options. I'm going to change the span until we got something desirable, something like that. Excellent. I'll then hit I to inset, just inset that a little bit, and we'll change the thickness to 0.5. I'll then hit numpad 1, go into side view. I'll then scroll up to here and toggle wireframe view. I'll then hit E, X, hold down Control, snap it to the grid, and we'll bring it in to, let's say, around about there. I'll then go up to here into solid view. I'm going to hit I for inset, take it in to around about there, and we'll give a thickness of, let's say, 0.5. I'll then hit numpad 1 to go into side view. I'm going to toggle into wireframe view again. I'll then hit E, X, hold down Control, snap it to the grid until it's in line with the back. I'm going to go back into solid view. I for inset, and we'll change the thickness to 0.5. Now we need to straighten these lines out. Let's just collapse the inset faces first, and I'll scroll up to here, and I'm going to change my pivot point from median to active element. Select this vertex. I'm going to hold down Control and select this bottom vertex. I'll then hit SY0, hit enter. I'll then select this vertex, hold down Control and select this vertex. I'm going to hit SY0. I'll then select this vertex, hold down Control and select this one, SZ0, hit enter. I'll then select this one, Control and select this one, SZ0. Excellent. I'm going to hit number 3 to go into face select. I'm going to select this face, hold down Control, shift and select this face. So we've got all these faces selected. I'll then hit I, and I'll hit I 1 more time. I'll just bring this in to around about there. I'll then take my cursor to the bottom left and expand the inset faces options, and we're going to change the thickness value to 0.25 and then hit enter. I'll then hit number 1 to toggle into vertex select. I'm going to navigate up here and go back into wireframe view. I'm going to hit numpad 1 to go into side view, E, X, hold down Control and snap it to the grid till around about there. Now if I go back into solid view, I'm going to tab out of edit mode. This is the back end. Excellent. I'm not entirely happy with this back end, so I'm going to tab into edit mode. And with these inner faces selected, I'm going to hit Control plus, and that will expand the selection. Hit Control plus again, until we've got all these vertices selected. I'm going to hit numpad 1 to go into front view, G, X, hold down Control, snap it to the grid till around about, let's say, there perhaps. Okay, I'm happy with that. I'll then hit number 3 to go into face select. So now I want to add a bit more detail on these faces. I'm just going to change my pivot point back from active element to median point. I'll then hit number 3 to go into face select. I'm going to select these 3 faces here. So I'll select this one, hold down Control, Shift and left click select this one. I'll Shift left click select this one, Control Shift left click select this one. I'll then hit I for inset, and I'm going to change the thickness to 0.5. Number 1 to toggle into vertex select. Go into wireframe view. I'm going to hit numpad 1 to go into side view, E, X, hold down Control, snap it to the grid, SX0, hit enter. Go back into solid view, tab out of edit mode, just see what we've got. Okay, it's coming along quite nicely. tab into edit mode. I'm going to hit number 3 to go into face select. I'm going to select this face, shift out and select in between these faces a couple of times until we got this entire face loop selected. I'm then going to hit shift D to duplicate. I'm going to right click to cancel that back in its original place. I'm going to hit P to separate and I'm going to choose selection, tab out of edit mode. I'm going to select that piece. I'm going to tab into edit mode, select all the vertices. I'll then hit SX.5, hit enter. I'll tab out of edit mode. I'll then navigate to my modifier tab over here. I'll click add modifier. We go to generate and I'm going to choose solidify. I'm going to choose even thickness and we're going to increase this. You might have to change your offset to a positive value. So I'm just going to increase this to, let's say, 2 meters. I'll then click this button and I'm going to apply that modifier. I'm going to tab into edit mode. I'm going to hit number 1 to go into vertex select. I'm going to select this vertex, hold down shift out and left click, select the entire edge loop. I'm going to hit X and we're going to delete the vertices and I'm going to do the same for this one. So I'll select this vertex, shift out, left click, select the entire edge loop, hit X and we'll delete those vertices. And the reason why we've done this instead of scaling it up is so that the distance is uniform all the way around. Tab out of edit mode. Now we've got this piece selected, so we go add modifier, I'm going to go to generate and we're going to choose solidify. And let's say we're going to solidify this object to, let's say, 1. Okay, I'm going to be happy with that. Also, we'll select even thickness just to ensure it's uniform. I'll then apply that modifier. Tab into edit mode, I'm going to hit Ctrl R and we're going to add 2 loop cuts there. So scroll your mouse wheel until you've got 2 loop cuts. And we're going to do the same for this side. Ctrl R, scroll your mouse wheel until you've got 2 loop cuts. Excellent. I'm going to hit 3 for face select. I'm going to hold down shift out and left click select this face loop. I'll then hit E, S and X to scale it on the X axis to around about there. We're going to keep these face loops selected. We'll come back to that in a minute. I'll then tab out of edit mode. Before we continue, we should probably save the Blender file. So I'm going to go to File, I'm going to choose Save As, and I'm going to save the file as like and subscribe. Thanks folks, you absolute legends. Then click Save As. So I'm just going to rename these parts. So I'm going to select this part and I'm going to call it DSX Base Mesh. And for this object, I'm going to rename it to DSX Base Loop. I'm just going to hide those 2 objects. I'll then hit Shift A. I'm going to go to Mesh and I'm going to choose Cylinder. For the vertices, I'm going to choose, let's say, 12 vertices. That should be more than enough. And we're going to rotate it on the Y-axis by 90 degrees. I'm going to collapse these options here. I'm going to re-enable the 2 meshes. I'm going to tab into edit mode. I'm going to hit numpad 1 to go into front view. I'll then toggle into wireframe view. G, X, hold down control, snap it to the grid. You can hold down shift as well and that will snap it in finer increments. I'll then hit SX, hold down control, snap it to the grid till around about there, just so there's a little bit of intersection. Maybe I can add a few loop cuts here. So I'm going to hit Control R. I'm going to scroll my mouse wheel till I've got 3 loop cuts. I'll then hit Shift D, X, and we'll drag this over to here. Tab out of edit mode. Shift D to duplicate, hit escape to snap it back into place. I'm going to tab into edit mode. Let's just go into solid view. We've got a bit of a problem here. We've got some inner faces which we don't want. So I'm going to hit number 3 to go into face select. I'm going to select this face. I'm going to hit X and we'll go delete faces. I'm going to scroll into here. I'll select this face. I'm going to hit X and we'll choose delete faces. And the same for this object here. So I'm just going to scroll in, select this face, hit X, delete the faces. And we'll choose this face here as well. So I hit X and delete faces. I'll then select all the vertices. I'm going to right click and we're going to choose unsubdivide. I'm going to hit numpad 1 to go into vertex select. I'll toggle into wireframe view, hit S, shift X, point 2, and that will scale down on every axis excluding the X axis by 0.2. I'll hit enter, G, Z, hold down control to snap it to the grid so it's around about there. Shift D, Z, hold down control, snap it to the grid till it's mirrored. If I just go into solid view quick, let's see what we've got. Okay, just going to select all the vertices. I'll hit Shift D to duplicate. I'll hit escape to snap it back into place. R, X, 90, rotate it on the X axis by 90 degrees. I'll then hit A to select all. Shift D, escape to snap it into place. R, X, 45, hit enter. Tab out of edit mode. Now we deleted the faces on these ones. Now we need to delete the faces on these ones here. So I'm just going to tab into edit mode. I'm going to hit number 3 to go into face select. Maybe we can do them all at the same time. So if I hit numpad 3 to go into the end view, it's going to go to wireframe view. I'm going to hit number 3 to go into face select. I'll then box select these faces here. That should have selected all of them. Yep, excellent. I'll then hit X and we'll choose delete faces. Tab out of edit mode. Go back to solid view. Okay. kind of happy with the progress so far. So we're almost done with the modeling. We just need to make a couple of pieces to join this piece onto this piece. I'm just going to mute all of my models. I'm going to hit Shift A, I'm going to go to Mesh, and we're going to choose Cylinder. I'll take my cursor to the bottom left, and we're going to expand the cylinder options. I'm going to change the cap fill type. This is what I should have done before, to nothing. So we've got no faces there. I'll then hit numpad 1, go into front view, tab into edit mode, G, Z, hold down control, snap it to the grid until the base of the cylinder is dead in line with your origin. I'll then tab out of edit mode, re-enable all of these models here. I'm going to hit numpad 3 to go into rear view. I'm going to hit G, Z, hold down control, snap it to the grid till around about there. G, Z, hold down control, snap it to the grid till around about there. S, Shift Z, hold down control, snap it to the grid till around about, let's say, there perhaps. I'll then hit S, Z, hold down control, snap it to the grid, want it around about there. Let's just make sure that we can't see that poking through. Nope, excellent. Maybe we can make it a bit thinner. So I'm just going to hit S, Shift Z, hold down control till around about there. I'll then hit Control A, apply the scale. I'll then right click, shade smooth. I'm going to hit numpad 3 to go into rear view. I'm going to hit Shift D, Z to duplicate on the Z axis to round about there. We'll snap it to the grid, R180. I'll then select this object, Shift D, hold down control to snap it to the grid. I'm going to bring it down to around about there, R90 minus to rotate it, negative 90 degrees. I'll then hit Shift D to duplicate Y and hold down control to drag it on the Y axis. R180 to rotate it 180 degrees. Hit enter. Shift D, hold down control to snap it to the grid till around about there. R45 negative. Rotate it 45 degrees. I'm just going to toggle into wireframe view. Shift D, Y, hold down control, snap it to the grid till it's around about there. I'll then hit R90 negative and then hit enter. Shift select this object. I'm going to hit Shift D, Z, hold down control, snap it to the grid till it's there, and we're going to rotate this R90 negative, hit enter, and we'll rotate this one R90, hit enter. With these objects selected, we're going to go to pivot point and we're going to change it to individual origins. I'm then going to hit S, Z and Z one more time. We're just going to scale them in slightly to around about there. Okay, I'll then change it back to median point. I'll then shift select these objects. I'll then hit Control J, and that will join them as one object. Now we want them to share the same origin as this. So with this object selected, I'm going to hit Shift S, and we're going to choose Cursor to Selected. Select this object here, and we'll go to Object, Set Origin, and we'll choose Origin to 3D Cursor. I can then toggle back into solid view. Okay, so that's the modeling done. Now we're going to add levels of detail using the discombobulator and of course by making a sci-fi material. Before we do that, we should add a base material. So I'm just going to go to my bottom left and collapse these options down here. I'll go to my bottom left again until I see a crosshair. I'm going to left click and drag up to open up a new window. I'm going to click this button here and we're going to change it to the shader editor. Toggle my overlays back on. So with this object selected, I'm going to select my default material. If you haven't got one, just click new and we'll call this base material. And for this base material, turn it black. I'm going to turn the roughness all the way up to 1 and I'm going to expand specular. And I'm going to change the IOR level to 0.25. IOR is index of refraction, if you didn't know. I think we could add a tiny bit more detail just on this front piece. So I'm going to tab into edit mode. I'm going to hit number 3 to go into face select. I'm going to select these 3 faces here. Shift D to duplicate. I'm going to hit numpad 7 to go into top view. G, Y, hold down control, snap it to the grid to around about there. E, Y, hold down control, snap it to the grid till around about there perhaps. I'm just going to check my normals are pointing outwards. So over here with my overlays, I'm going to click this button and I'm going to choose face orientation. Now everything should be blue. If you see anything that's red, for example, if this face was red, you just go to mesh, normals, and you choose flip. Of course, we don't want anything red. We want the normals pointing outwards. So I'm going to select this face. We go to mesh, normals, and flip. I'll then toggle off face orientation. I'm going to hit number 2 to go into edge select. I'm going to select this edge. I'm going to hit numpad 1 to go into side view. G, X, hold down control, snap it to the grid till around about there. I'll then hit number 3 to go into face select. I'm going to select that face. I'm going to hit I to inset faces. I'm going to expand the inset face options and I'm going to type in 0.5 for the thickness. I'll then hit number 1 to go into vertex select. I'm going to go into wireframe view, numpad 1 to go into side view. E, X, hold down control, snap it to the grid. I'll then hit SX 0, hit enter. I'll then go into solid view. Okay, we need to join these together now. So I'm going to hit Control R and I'm going to add 2 loop cuts here. I'll then hit number 3 for face select. So I'm going to select this face. Shift left click, select this one, I for inset, and I'm going to change the inset to, let's say, 0.5. Okay, excellent. I'm going to hit numpad 7 to go into top view. E, hold down Control, snap it to the grid to around about there, just so it intersects. Excellent. So with one of these faces selected, I'm going to hover my cursor over that face and hit L, and that will select the entire part. I'll then hit P and we'll choose separate by selection, tab out of edit mode, select that object. I'll then hit Shift D and escape, SY1 minus, and that will scale it on the y-axis by -1. I'm going to tab into edit mode, I'm going to select all the faces, and for the top menu we'll select mesh, we'll go to normals and we'll choose recalculate outside, tab out of edit mode, shift select this object, I'm going to hit Control J and that will join it as one object, shift select this object, Control J, and now it's part of that object. Excellent. Let's just double check the normals for everything. So I've got everything selected, I'm going to click this arrow, I'll click face orientation. Okay, this one's off. I thought it might be. I'll hover my cursor over this object. I'm going to hit L. We go to Mesh, Normals, Flip. Okay, excellent. Tab out of edit mode. Click this arrow up here on your overlays and we'll disable face orientation. I'm just going to save the project by hitting Control S. Okay, so the base material that we created for this main object, we're going to apply it to all the other objects in our scene. So I'm going to select this mesh, shift and left click select this one, shift left click select this one, shift left click select this one. I'll then shift left click select this one. I'm going to hit Control L and I'm going to choose link materials. So now they should all have that same material. Let's just double check. Excellent. Before we move on to discombobulating this mesh, I'm just going to clean up this base mesh here because there's a few inconsistencies. So I'm going to tab into edit mode. The things we're going to clean up will be these lines here because they're not entirely straight and I want to make them straight. I'll left click select this line, I'm going to hold down Control, left click select this one, hold down Shift, left click select this, hit Control and left click select this one. I'll navigate over to here, I'm going to hold down Shift, left click select this, hold down Control, left click select this one. I'll do the same over here. I'll then hit 1 to go into vertices select. I'm just going to hold down Shift and left click select this a couple of times until this is the active element. I'll then change my pivot point from median point to active element. I'll just make sure that I've got all those selected. Excellent. I'll then hit SZ0. Now they're completely straight. I'm going to do the same for these bottom ones. So I'll left click select this vertex. I'm going to hold down Control, left click select this one. I'll shift select this one, hold down Control, left click select this one. Shift, left click select this, hold down Control, left click select this one, hold down Shift, left click select this one, hold down Control and left click select this one. Again, we've still got the median point set to active element, so I hit SZ0. Now we're going to discombobulate this mesh, so I'm going to hit number 3 to go into face select. The discombobulator only works on quads, so that's a face with 4 vertices, and it's also only going to apply to faces that are selected. So what I'll do is I'm going to select all the faces, and then I'm going to deselect the faces I don't want it to apply to. I'll hold down Shift and left click to deselect this face. I'm also going to hold down Shift out and left click to deselect these inner faces here. I'm going to do the same for this side, so hold down Shift, left click to deselect, hold down Shift out and left click and deselect that face loop. Maybe I want to deselect these ones inside. We're going to discombobulate these separately. I'll also hold down Shift out and left click to deselect that face loop. Okay, let's just move on to the rear. So I'm going to hold down Shift and deselect these faces. I'm going to hold down Shift out and deselect these face loops here. I'll do the same for the other side. So hold down Shift, left click, deselect. Hold down Shift out and left click and deselect these face loops here. Also, let's spin it round. I'm going to hold down Shift and deselect all of these faces. And I'm going to deselect these inner face loops too. So that's hold down Shift out and left click to deselect. Excellent. Maybe we can deselect this inner face loop too. So hold down Shift out and left click. The same for here. And the same for here. And the reason why I'm deselecting these inner points is because when we discombobulate, the faces are going to protrude outwards quite a lot. And we don't want them to intersect inside, so we'll discombobulate them separate and we'll give them a lighter discombobulation. Okay, so with all those faces selected, let me just increase this window a bit. So with all these faces selected, I'm going to hit Shift A and I'm going to choose Discombobulator. The settings I found suitable for my model with this scale: the min height I'm going to set to 0.1, the max height I'm going to set to 0.2, the min taper I'm going to set to 0.05, and the max taper I'm going to set to 0.15. These settings might be different for you depending on the scaling of your model. I'll then click OK. Now when you've okayed that, don't click anything, because if you need to adjust anything, you can move these sliders to give you a different result. I'm going to stick to the settings that I already have. Okay, excellent. Now in your outliner, it would have added this mesh, discombobulated mesh. I'm just going to mute that from the viewport. I'll then select the base mesh again. I'm going to tab into edit mode. So now I'm going to hit Control I, and that will invert the selection. So all the deselected faces are now selected. I'm just going to zoom into the rear end. I'll then hit Shift A, discombobulator. I'm going to click OK. Now if these are protruding out a bit too much, as you can see, they're a bit high there. So I'm going to set my min height to 0.05 and my max height to 0.1. Okay, that's looking a bit better. Let's just re-enable the original discombobulated mesh. Now we're going to join these two discombobulated meshes together. With this discombobulated mesh selected, I'll then shift select the other discombobulated mesh, hit Control J, and that will join it as one object. So we've now got this object here. Excellent. Now we need to work on these ones. So maybe I just want to discombobulate this inner mesh here, and I probably won't discombobulate these ones. So I'm going to select this inner mesh, which are these two cylinders, tab into edit mode. I'm going to select all the vertices, Shift A, go to discombobulator. I'll then click OK. Excellent. With this mesh that's been discombobulated, I'll then shift select this discombobulated mesh, and I'm going to hit Control J, and that will join it onto the geometry. If you want to add a bit more detail, for example, you could tab into edit mode, you could select this face here, hit Shift A and go to discombobulator and click OK, and that will add another discombobulated mesh. I don't want that, so I'm just going to hit Control Z to undo that. Excellent. So we're going to give this a few materials. Let's just start off with the basic ones. So we've already got the base material, which should be a matte black with a roughness set to 1. The second material will be an emission material. So I'm going to tab into edit mode with this object selected, and with these inner face loops selected, I'm going to take my cursor and go to my material settings over here. I'm going to click the plus button and I'll click new to add a new material, and we'll rename this material to Emission. I'll then click Assign. I'll just increase this window so we can see what we're doing in the shader editor. I'm going to tab out of edit mode. I'm going to go to Look Dev View. I'm going to select the Principal BSDF. I'm going to hit Delete, Shift A, and I'm going to go to Shader, and we're going to choose Emission Shader. I'll just pop that into the surface. Maybe I'll set this to like a orange color, something around there, and we'll give it a value of 5. We can change this a bit later on. Now for the emission, I want this to emit out of these engine parts as well. So I'm going to go into Viewport Shading, and with the base mesh selected, I'll scroll down until I see Viewport Display, and for the color, I'm just going to bring this down to close to a black. I'll scroll up. I'll then select Emission. I'm going to scroll down and I'll set the viewport display color to, let's say, like an orange color. Okay, now I'll select this discombobulated mesh here, tab into edit mode. I'm going to select this face. I'm going to hit Control L, and that will ensure that the whole protrusion is selected. I'll then navigate to the other side. I'm going to hold down Shift and left click select this face, and with my cursor over that face I'm going to hit Control L, and that will ensure that that protrusion is selected as well. So we've got both of these. I'll navigate over to my materials. I'll select the second slot and I'm going to change it from base material to emission. I'll then click Assign. So now inside the engine ports are also the emission material. I'm going to select this face, shift select this one, shift select these, do the same for these three. And the same as the other side, we'll just select these faces. I'll then hit Control plus a couple of times just to ensure that I've got all the protrusions selected. I'm going to click Add Material. We're going to choose the emission material. Tab out of edit mode. I'm going to click this free button, and that will give us a second emission material. And we'll rename this to Emission Blue. And we're going to change this to a blue color, around about there. I'll tab into edit mode. I'm going to click Assign. I'll just scroll down until I got Viewport Display, and we're going to change this to a blue color. Excellent. I'm going to tab out of edit mode. I'm going to scroll up. I'll then select the first emission material, and we'll rename this to Emission Orange. I'll navigate round to the rear of the engine, tab into edit mode. I'm going to select this face. I'm going to select these faces and all the inner faces for the engine part. So once you've got all of those selected, hit Control plus a couple of times just to ensure that we've selected all the protrusions. I'll then click Emission Orange and I'll click Assign. I'll do the same for all these outer protrusions. And when you've got all those selected, I'm going to hit Control plus a couple of times just to ensure that all the protrusions are selected. I'll select the Emission Blue and click Assign. I'll then tab out of edit mode. Excellent. Now I want to illuminate inside this loading bay. With the discombobulated mesh selected, I'll tab into edit mode. I'm going to left click select this face, shift left click select this one, and we'll select all of these. Again, hit Control plus just to ensure that we've selected all the protrusions. I'm going to go to Emission Orange and I'm going to choose Assign. In my shader editor, I'm going to hit N to hide the N panel. Now let's crack on with the Sci-Fi panel material. With the discombobulated mesh selected, I'll navigate to my materials over here and I'm going to click on base material. In your node editor where it says base material, I'm going to click the number 10 and this will make it its own unique material, and we'll rename this material to Sci-Fi 1. Now we need to open up the displacement textures that you downloaded. So with the principal BSDF selected and the node wrangler enabled, I'm going to hit Control T and that will add an image texture, a mapping and a texture coordinate node. I'm going to hit G, just drag this across over to around about there. I'll click Open, navigate to where you saved your textures, select the first texture that you downloaded and click Open. I'll navigate into viewport shading so we can preview what we're doing. The reason the image texture isn't coming through is because we're using UV coordinates and this hasn't got a UV map. So let's make one now. So I'm going to change my view from layout to UV editing. I'm going to hit numpad 1 to go into side view, hit A to select all the vertices. I'm going to hit U, choose unwrap, and I'll select light map pack. I'm going to increase the pack quality to, let's say, 16, and I'll reduce the margin to, let's say, 0.04. I'll then click OK. So this is our UV map. We'll go back to layout and now you can see the texture is coming through absolutely fine. Excellent. So with the mapping node we can increase and decrease the scale of the texture. I'm going to increase it to, let's say, 1.25. I'll then hit Shift A converter and I'll choose color ramp. So I'm going to connect the color from the displacement X map to the factor of the color ramp and the color from the color ramp into the metallic of the principal BSDF. I'll hold down Control, right click and drag, and that will disconnect that noodle. So white will be 100% metallic and black will be no metallic. I'll change the interpolation type on my color ramp from linear to constant. I'm going to drag this flag across. Maybe I'll increase the brightness just so we can see what we're doing a bit. I'm going to add another 4 more flags. So on my color ramp, I'm going to click the plus button 4 times. And then I'll drag this flag across. I'll drag this one across and we'll set this to white. So that'll be metallic. I'll drag this one across. I'll drag this one across and we'll turn this one to white. So that'll be metallic too. So all the darker colors on here are metallic and all the lighter colors are non-metallic. Maybe I can tweak this. So I'm just going to drag these flags across. Something around there. Maybe drag that one across. Okay, I'm kind of happy with that. So with this color ramp selected, hit Shift D to duplicate and I'll pop that up here. I'll then plug the color from the displacement X texture into the factor and the color from the color ramp into the base color. This first flag I'm going to set to kind of like a khaki color, maybe something around there perhaps, just nice and subtle, maybe a bit less saturation. I'll keep this second flag as a black color. Maybe I'll just drag this across and I'm going to set this to like a sky blue, something around there. I think I'm going to delete this flag here. Keep this one set to black. Maybe I'll delete this one here as well. I'll just drag this across. I'm going to lighten it up a bit. So I'm going to take the saturation down, something around there. And I'm going to bring in a bit more black. Maybe we can have a bit more khaki. In fact, I'm going to reduce this black, reduce this blue. And I'm going to set this first flag to white. Okay, I'm kind of happy with that. Now we need a roughness factor. So I'll just re-shimmy some of these color ramps. I'm going to take this color ramp, I'm going to hit Control Shift D, and that will duplicate the color ramp whilst maintaining the connection to the previous node. I'll then plug this color into the roughness. I'll delete a couple of these flags, so I'm going to hit the minus button twice. I'm going to drag this first flag over to here. I'm going to take the color down to around about there, perhaps maybe 0.5 on the value. I'll then set this middle flag here to a white color, 100% white, so that's going to be 100% rough. This next flag, I'll reduce the strength of the value so it's a bit more shinier, maybe increase it slightly, something around there. And for the last flag, I'm going to set to a white, but maybe just under white, something around there. Excellent. Okay. Technically, on your displacement texture, the color space should be set to non-color, but we're going to keep it as sRGB. The next image texture we're going to use will be for the lights. So I'm just going to select this texture coordinate node. I'm going to hit G, bring this across to around about there. I'll then box select the mapping node and this image texture node. Hit Control Shift D to duplicate those nodes whilst maintaining the connection to the previous nodes. I'll then hold down Shift, right click and drag, and that will add a control point in between just so it's easier to manage. I'll then hit G, just bring this down to maybe around about there. For this image texture, I'm going to remove that image. I'm going to click open, navigate to where you saved your displacement X textures, and we're going to be using the texture with the grid and the rectangles, which will be this one here. I'll then click open. On my principal BSDF, I'm just going to collapse the specular slot. I'll then expand the emission slot. I'll hit Shift A. I'm going to go to converter. We're going to choose color ramp. Plug the color from this image texture into the factor of the color ramp, and I'm going to add one more flag. So I'm going to click the plus button. We're going to change it from linear to constant for this middle flag. I'm going to drag it over to here, and I'm going to change this to a blue color, something around about there. And for this first flag, I'm going to set to an orange color. I'll then drag this first flag all the way across over to there. I'll then hit Shift A and go to converter. We're going to add another color ramp. We'll set the interpolation type from linear to constant. Again, I'm going to plug the color into the factor of this color ramp, and the color from this color ramp into the strength of the emission. I'll then plug the color from this color ramp into the color of the emission. I'm just going to go into rendered view quick. I'm going to go to my world settings over here. I'm going to change the background strength to 0. So now if I drag this flag on this color ramp, you should start seeing the lights coming through. See the blue coming through there, and some orange as well. We just need to adjust the scaling. So I'm going to go to my mapping node over here, and for the scale on X, Y, and Z, I'm going to change this to 10. Excellent. I'm just going to drag this orange flag across so we've got a bit more orange. I want more orange than blue. If you didn't know, by the way, orange is a complementary colour to blue because they're opposite on the colour wheel. So we're going to try and maintain a complementary colour palette. It's not coming through very bright. So what we can do here, so where this color ramp is plugged into the strength of the emission, we can increase the strength with a math node. So I'm going to hit Shift A, I'm going to go to converter, and we'll choose math. We'll pop that in between the color ramp and the strength, and we'll change this to multiply. And I'm going to give it a strength of, let's say, 5. There we go. It's coming through a lot better now. Excellent. I might actually change my render engine to cycles. So I'm going to go to my render settings over here. I'm going to change it from Eevee to cycles. There we go. It's coming through a lot better. Excellent. There's way too many lights on this ship for my liking, so I'm just going to bring this flag all the way up to around about there, maybe a bit more. After doing this, we are going to have to adjust these flags for the colours. So I'm just adjusting these flags until we get a bit more blue in the scene. It's a bit too much, maybe something around there. I'll just go to viewport shading. I'll then click this arrow up here. I'm going to click scene lights and scene world just so we can see what we're doing. Maybe disable overlays. Just drag this flag across. Go back into rendered view. Okay, I'm kind of happy with that. Just going to go back into viewport shading. I'm going to click this arrow again. Disable scene lights and scene world. Now we're going to open up the other two maps. So the other two maps will be a displacement map and the corresponding normal map. So I'm going to select this mapping node. I'm going to shift select this image texture node. I'm going to hit Control Shift D to duplicate those nodes whilst maintaining the connection to the previous node. I'll click the X to remove that image texture from the slot. I'll then click open, navigate to your displacement maps, and these two go together. So I'll select this one and click open. I'll then select this image texture node. I'm going to hit Control Shift D to duplicate that node whilst maintaining the connection to the previous node. I'll remove that image texture, click open, navigate to your image textures, and I'll select the normal map. I'll then click open. Now for the normal map, it is important to change the color space from sRGB to non-color data. And while we're here, we might as well change the color space on the displacement map to non-color data as well. I'll then hit Shift A. I'm going to go to vector and we'll choose bump. I'll then hit Shift A. We go to vector and we choose normal map. I'll plug the displacement map into the height of the bump map, the normal from the normal map into the normal of the bump map, and the color from the normal map texture into the normal map node. I'll just drag these over just to neaten it up a little bit. We'll then drag the principal BSDF down to here. And I'm going to plug the normal from the bump node into the normal socket of the principal BSDF. Okay, that scaling is way off. So let's just reduce the scale on the mapping node for X, Y, and Z to 2.5. Let's see what that does. Excellent. Okay, I'm kind of happy with that. Now we need to set up our camera and a light just so we can see what we've done so far. If you've got the problem where you zoom out and your ship disappears, just hit N on your N panel, click the View tab over here, and just increase your clip end. And you should see it. Mine's set to 1000, so I'm good. So I'll just click N to hide the N panel, and I'm going to move my viewport till I've got an angle that I kind of like. Maybe something around about there perhaps. I'll then hit Control Alt Numpad 0, and that will align the camera to the view. I'll then select my camera. I'm going to go to my object data over here, and I'll drag my camera on the x-axis to round about there. As you can see, it's clipping. So for viewport, you've got your clipping settings and hit Numpad 0, and we've also got clipping settings for our camera. So I'm going to select my camera data over here, and under clipping for clip start and clip end, I'm going to increase the clip end to, let's say, 1,000 meters. I then go back to my object data, and I'm going to drag my camera to maybe something around about there. Set the Y rotation to 0, and I'm just going to center the spacecraft. In space, you usually only have one source of light, which would be the sun, but I'm going to go for more of an artistic approach, and again, we're going to be using complementary colors. So the sun's going to be orange, and the ambient light is going to be blue, and that will kind of simulate the ambient light coming off a planet. So I'm going to hit Shift A, I'm going to go to light, and I'm going to choose sun. I'll hit G, Z, just drag this up so we can see where it is. The location of a sun doesn't really matter. What matters is the direction. So let's just go into rendered view. I want to rotate the sun on the x-axis by, let's say, 40 degrees perhaps, maybe 45 degrees. I'll then hit Numpad 7 to go into top view, and I'll rotate it on the z-axis by, let's say, negative 120. I'll just go into camera view to see what we've got. Okay, maybe we can increase the rotation on the x-axis to, let's say, around about 70 degrees. I kind of like that. I'll disable overlays just so I can get a clearer picture. Okay, I'm kind of happy with that. Maybe we can increase the strength of the sun to, let's say, 10. That's quite bright. Okay, I'm going to reduce it down to 7.5, and I'm going to also change the color to like a warm orange glow, something around there. The next light will be the ambient blue, which is going to be shining on the underside. So I'm going to hit Shift A, I'm going to go light, and I'm going to choose sun. Hit G, Z, and I'll bring this down just so we can see where it is. I then go to my object data over here, and on the X rotation, I'm going to type in 180, so it's pointing directly up. As it stands, the shadows are really sharp, so we're going to soften that. So I'll navigate to my light data tab over here. I'm going to change the color to blue, maybe something around there, and to soften the shadows, we're going to increase the angle to 175 degrees. I'll also reduce the strength to, let's say, 0.25. Maybe we can change the color a bit so it's a bit richer. I'll reduce the strength even more to, let's say, 0.05. Let's just see what that looks like. I'm not entirely happy with the direction of the original sun. It's casting too much light on there. So I'm going to select the original sun. I'm going to go to my object data tab. I'm just going to increase the x-axis to, let's say, 80 degrees. I'm going to disable my overlays, and we're going to increase the strength of this light bar here. So I'm going to go to material tab over here, and with the emission orange, I'm going to set the strength to, let's say, 100 for 100 watts. Maybe we can reduce that to 50, and also I'll just re-enable my overlays. I'll select this object, and for the emission blue, we're going to set this to, let's say, 50. I'll just disable overlays so I can see what's happening. Before we tweak this any further, I think it's a good idea just to render out a frame just to see what we've got. So I'm going to go over to my render settings over here. I'm going to change the noise threshold to 0.025 and the max samples to 256. That should do for now. I'll then hit F12, and that will render out a preview. Okay, it's not looking too bad. I think the sun could be slightly brighter, perhaps. Maybe change the angle slightly. And I think possibly these lights could be slightly bigger. So I'm going to close this window. I'm going to go into viewport shading. And with this mesh selected, I'm going to increase the shader editor. I'm going to go to my material tab over here. I'm going to select the Sci-Fi material. And if you remember, this texture was the one that controls the emission. So I'm going to reduce the scale to, let's say, 7.5. Maybe I can increase the threshold of which the lights come through. I'm just going to drag this to the left slightly, just so we got a few more lights. I'll then select the first sun, which is the orange tone one. I'm going to set the strength to 10. I'm going to increase the angle to 5, and that will make the shadows a bit softer. Maybe I can tweak the direction of that sun as well. So I'm going to go to my object data tab with the sun selected, and for the Z rotation with the sun, I'm going to change this to negative 110 degrees. I'll just re-enable my overlays. I'm going to select my camera, and to make this look a bit better, I'm going to increase the focal length to, let's say, 180mm, because in space you'd be quite far away from this vessel, so you want quite a high focal length. And then I'll just hit G, Z, Z. I'll just drag this back to, let's say, around about there. I'll then go to my object data. I'm going to rotate the camera on the Z axis just so I've got the whole ship in view. Maybe I'll hit G, Z, Z, just drag it back a bit more. I'm still not happy with the direction of this first sun. I think too much of this is in light, and we don't really want that. So I'm going to decrease the X rotation to maybe 5-10 degrees. And I think I'll decrease the Z rotation to, let's say, negative 150. Okay, excellent. So I'm going to switch back to viewport shading. We're going to give this sci-fi material a viewport shading color. So go to your material tab over here, and with the sci-fi 1 material selected, I'm going to scroll down and I'll just change the color to, let's say, green. Now I'm going to select this object here with these cylinders, and under your material tab up here, scroll up until you see your material slots, and we're going to change it from base material to sci-fi F1. I'm then going to click the 2 button, and that will make it its own material, and we'll rename this to Sci-Fi 2. We'll also change the viewport color to maybe an aqua color, just so it's easy to see. And under metallic, I'm going to disconnect the color ramp, and I'm going to change it to 100% metallic. I'm going to delete this node. I'll just go into viewport shading over here into look dev mode. I'll then tab into edit mode. I'm going to select all the vertices. I'm going to go to UV editing. I'll then click U and we choose reset. I'll then click U, we choose unwrap, and we choose light map pack. I'll click OK. I'll then go back to my layout view. I'm going to scroll to the second image texture, and for the scaling I'm going to type in 2.5, and for the bottom textures on the mapping I'm going to choose 0.5. Maybe we'll decrease the middle texture to, let's say, 1. We're just going to change the colours now. So instead of having a green, I'm going to take the saturation all the way down, bring it up to like a grey colour. Maybe this one can be a slightly darker colour, and maybe this one I'm going to turn the saturation all the way down, and maybe we'll take this down a bit, something around there. Maybe we don't want pure white in there, so I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to tweak these values until I've got something that I like, to round about there. Now for the roughness, I might darken some of these flags, so I'll select this flag, I'll bring it across, and I'm going to bring this down to round about there. Maybe this one, I'll bring this one down. Maybe for this one, we'll bring this down slightly, and this one, bring this up. Just going to go into rendered view. Maybe for the emissive light on that texture, I'm going to increase that to 2.5, maybe a bit more, let's say 5. Okay, I think that'll do. I hit numpad 0 to go into camera view. I'm going to go into viewport shading, re-enable my overlays. I'm just going to hit F12 and render out that frame. I'm still not happy with the lights that appear on the ship. They're a bit too griddy, so maybe we can drag the flags across to get rid of these grids and have more of a random distribution. So I'm going to close this window. I'm going to go into viewport render. I'm going to zoom in. We might need to add another flag to get over this. Select this discombobulated mesh. I'll then select this black flag on this color ramp. I'm going to click delete. I'll just drag the blue flag all the way across, and then on this color ramp I'm going to select this white flag here, and we'll bring this all the way across. I'll then click plus to add another flag. This flag is going to be set to black, and I'll drag this across over to here, maybe round about there. And now we're going to have to adjust this orange flag to correspond with the other flags. Now we just adjust these flags. Now I'm just going to drag this flag across until I've got something that I like, maybe something around there. I'll just render out this frame just to have a preview. Okay, that's looking a bit better. Maybe there's still too many lights on there, so I'll close this window. So I'll go into viewport render. So on this color ramp with the colors, I'm going to click the plus button. We'll add another flag. We'll select this first flag and we'll turn this to black. That should mute out some of the lights. Maybe drag the blue flag across so we've got more black. Okay, that's looking a bit better. I'm still not happy with the color of the sun, so I'm going to select the sun and I'm going to change this. Instead of having a warm color, I'm going to have a cool color, something around there, and I'll reduce the strength to, let's say, 7.5. I'm also going to select this object, and with the original Sci-Fi 1 material, I'm going to go to my bump. I'm going to choose invert. I'll then reduce the distance to 0.5 just to reduce the bump a bit. That's still quite strong, so maybe 0.25. Okay, just go into viewport shading. I'll just hit F12 and render out a preview. Okay, we're making progress, just a bit more tweaking. I think I want to see a bit more black on the panels on here. Also, I think I want to increase the strength of this blue emission and this orange emission here. Let's do that now. So I'll click escape. I'll select this object, and for the orange, I'm going to change the strength to 100. I'll select this object, and with the emission blue selected, I'm going to change this to 100. I'll then go into viewport render, and with the Sci-Fi 1 material selected, I'm going to scroll all the way up, and with this top color ramp selected, I'm just going to drag this blue across to around about there. I'll drag the black across to around about there, just so we've got a few more black panels. I'll keep the khaki as is. Maybe I'll make it a bit darker. So I'll select the khaki flag and I'll take the value down to, let's say, 0.2. Excellent. Okay, I'm just going to go into viewport shading. And for the colour on the mapping node, I'm going to change the location on the X until I've got something that I like. Maybe something around there. Now we're going to do a bit of compositing, but before we do that, just hit Control S and save your progress. So I'm going to go over to my compositing tab over here. I'm going to click Use Nodes. I'm going to hit N to open up the N panel. I'll then click the View tab and we'll enable Backdrop. I'll then hit Control Shift and left click the render layers, and that will add a viewer node. I'll just drag this down here. I'll then hold down Shift, right click and drag, and that will join those two together. I'll just hit G, box select all of these. I'll hit G, drag these across over to here, maybe increase this window. I'll then click Fit and I'll drag this across over to here. I'll just go back to my layout settings over here. I'm going to change my render settings, so I'm going to go to my render tab. I'm going to set the noise threshold to 0.01 and the max samples to 1024 just for now. I'm going to scroll down until I see light paths. I'm going to disable reflective and refractive caustics. I'll then hit F12. When that's rendered, hit Escape. And then go to Compositing. I'll then hit Shift A. I'm going to go to Filter and we'll choose Glare. I'll pop that in between the render layer and the composite. I'll change it from streaks to fog glow. I'm going to increase the size and I'm going to decrease the mix to, let's say, 0.9. Maybe I can decrease the threshold to 0.5. Maybe I'll add a bit of lens distortion. So I'm going to hit Shift A. I'm going to go to Transform and we'll choose Lens Distortion. I'll pop that in between the glare and the composite. I'm going to click Fit. I'm going to set the distortion to negative 0.010 and the dispersion to 0.010. Maybe I'll increase the dispersion to 0.02 and the distortion to negative 0.02. I think I want to soften the overall image. I'll just drag these across over to here. Shift A, we go to Filter and we choose Filter, and I'll plug that in between the lens distortion and the composite node, and I'm going to set the factor to 0.25 and that will just soften it ever so slightly. I still think we've got too many lights on the ship itself, so maybe I'm going to go back to my layout. I'm going to go into rendered view and with your Sci-Fi 1 material, go to the image texture that controls your lights, go to the color ramp, maybe just adjust these flags. There we go. I'm going to go to my output over here. I'm going to set this to 200%. I hit F12. Okay, I think the final step is to emphasize some of the original geometry. So we need to have bevel on the edges of all these panels, and I don't want to add a bevel modifier. Instead we'll do that in the shader editor because there's a bevel node, and also maybe I'm going to adjust my texture as well slightly, maybe remap it slightly. So I'll close this window. I'll then go into viewport render, and where your bump node is over here, let's just zoom in so we can see the difference. So with your bump node, I'm going to hit Shift A, I'm going to go to input and I'm going to choose bevel, and I'll pop that in between the bump node and the principal BSDF. I'm going to keep it set to 0.05. Maybe I can increase the samples to 8. It just brings out the edges slightly. And as I mentioned, I'm going to remap the texture. So I'm going to go to my top mapping node and I'm going to change the X location to 0.25 to see what that looks like. Okay, maybe 1. Okay, that looks a bit better. It's not looking so good over here though. So maybe I'll set this to 2.5. Maybe 5. I'm going to keep moving this until I've got something desirable. It's not going to be perfect. I don't really like this blue colour either. So on my colour ramp up here where I've got the blue, I'm just going to darken this colour down to a really dark blue. Something around about there. Excellent. Now the final step will be to parent all of this to an empty object so we can animate the empty object and we don't have to select each individual part, which will be a bit of a pain. So in your outliner over here, I'm going to click this icon and I'm going to enable all of these. I'll just increase the outliner view. I'll then hit Shift A. I'm going to go empty and I'm going to choose cube. I'll then hit S just to scale that up to around about there, and maybe SX and scale it up to around about there, just so the ship is encompassed in this empty object, and we'll call this empty controller. I'll then select all of my objects, so I'm shift selecting them in my outliner, and when all the objects are selected, I'll then hit shift and left click select the empty object, control P, and I'll set parent to object keep transform. So now when I grab this empty object and hit G, everything moves with it. So I've got 240 frames on my timeline and my frame rate is set to 30 frames per second. I'll then go to my object data over here, and on frame 1 for the X location, I'm going to add a keyframe. I'll then skip to the last frame and I'm going to adjust my keyframe to maybe -20. I'll then add another keyframe. I'll then hover my cursor over my timeline and hit T, and I'm going to change it from Bezier to linear. So now if I hit play, we'll have a constant speed. Excellent. I'll just go into camera view. So for my final render settings, I'm going to go to my output. I'm going to set the resolution to 100%, so that's 1920 by 1080. So I'll go to output, I'll click the folder icon, navigate to a folder where you want to save your image sequence, click accept. I'll keep my file format set to PNG. It is advisable to go to OpenEXR and change the codec to DWAA lossy. That will decrease your file size while increasing your dynamic range, but for now I'm just going to choose PNG. I'm going to set my compression to 25% because PNG is lossless. I then go to my render settings over here. I'll change my max samples to 4096, and then it's simply a case of hitting Control F12 and that will render out your image sequence. So that's it in a nutshell. I hope you found this tutorial useful. If you did, please click like and subscribe. It really helps my channel. Have a great day, level up, and thanks for watching.